You guys are ready?
Alright, so,
Okay,
wait, can I start?
go ahead.
Okay, so our group had the evolution of birds from dinosaurs. And so there's many different theories about how birds actually came about from previous beings, but the dinosaur theory is one of the most commonly accepted. So here we have a very general kind of phylogeny of dinosaurs. And so the first kind of split off in the dinosaur family is the different kind of hips, the bird hip and the lizard hip dinosaurs. And so actually, oddly enough, the bird hip dinosaurs are not actually relatives of, well, they're not closer than the lizard hip relatives of modern birds, which is a little bit strange. And so then here from lizard hip dinosaurs, we see sauropods splitting off right here, which was about 265 million years ago. And here we see theropods about 210 million years ago. And then eventually from theropods, we see in between here, we eventually reach birds. And so these are all going to be lizard hip dinosaurs we see here. So our first kind of split off in our main phylogeny is the evolution of hollow bones, which was about 215 million years ago.
So like David said, the difference between the lizard hip and the bird hip is where the pubis points, and in the birds, the pubis bone points upwards, which allows for the standing position that and the upright position birds have now. And then the difference between like the human bone and a bird hollow bone, which is where the primary evolution begins. As you can see in the human bone, there's marrow and blood vessels all contained within the bone, where it's not found in a bird bone, because the human bones have more weight since they are full. It doesn't allow for the flying, which although the flying evolves later, all these sort of evolutionary things lead to the bird's ability to fly.
And so we found that doing research, there are different fossilizations for feathers. But the interesting part about that was that a lot of the feathers actually didn't come from birds that could fly. They actually started on flightless birds. And one of the examples of that would be the Archaeopteryx.
And yeah, because then the next evolution is the tufted feathers. And there is evidence that almost all dinosaurs had some type of, not a feather, but like the beginning evolution of the feather, that was sort of the stage one, the barb, which I guess the best example now is, I don't know if any of y'all, an elephant, you know how they have the small little barbs of, it's not fur, but on their skin. That's kind of what they believe majority of the dinosaurs had at that time. And so, as you can see, it evolves from the barb to more along what the feathers are now. And it's first seen in the Archaeopteryx 150 million years ago, and they were not evolved for flight at this point. So it's sort of what's known as ground-up evolution, and that is when a trait develops and then the function of that trait develops later. So the feathers developed and then flight came after feathers. And some reasons we believe that feathers developed was warmth. One of the ideas of where the dinosaurs go is the world's getting colder, and so the Archaeopteryx is developing these, or the dinosaurs are evolving these feathers for warmth throughout the time, as well as nest brooding, which we'll go into later.
Alright, so after our tough feathers and the divergence of the allosaur, the tough feathers was about 190 million years ago, by the way. We see a next split off in the Tyrannosaurus, which is Tyrannosaurus rex, a pretty commonly known dinosaur. And then we see the emergence of nest brooding, which was about 180 million years ago.
So there were some other fossilizations found that showed that a dino and a bird embryo actually looked very similar through their development inside the egg. And one fossilization in particular that was found in Thailand was that the eggs of a non-avian saurischian was found, and it looked exactly like a modern bird egg. They all shared the same structure, which is a 3-layered prismatic structure. And so it may have been, it's thought to that they have found a small feathered theropod. fossil, but I mean, they also don't know because it's still in the egg stage.
And so with the feathers and nest brooding, one idea is that the feathers are kind of like a courtship trait, and like peacocks, you know how the peacock with the brightest feathers attracts the mate. Well, because the world, we believe, is getting colder, the dinosaur with the most feathers is able to protect the nest and keep the eggs warm, and so they have a better chance of survival, which leads to, obviously, as we've talked about through evolution, they're passing on their traits more easily when they have the feathers.
Okay, so our next little split off here is, you see the oviraptor kind of diverging off here, as well as asymmetrical feathers, which is kind of another step in the whole feather pattern, and that happened about 170 million years ago.
And this is where, in this sort of area, is where you see more of the modern day feathers. And they're evolving. This is when the feathers more develop that idea of flight, because the dinosaurs, you'll see in the Dromaeosaurids, they start kind of a gliding motion. They also have they begin developing that flight simulation, and so the feathers are also developing to allow them to kind of glide. And this is hypothesized that this is developing for more of like the niche differentiation. They're able to get food that other animals can't because they can get there faster and are able to. It's just the feathers are beginning to specialize and the environment change. And you can see kind of the versus. As you can see here, the feathers are pretty just equal on both sides. They're starting to develop more of that one side larger than the other.
Alright, so our next little split off is, as Ari said, the dromaeosaur. And then we see a big step towards birds, which is long arms, which happened about 140 million years ago.
Again, the long arms are developing for that flight motion, and you can see through the various types of dinosaurs, their feet are developing more into the claw shape you see in birds now, sort of with this back digit to allow for that balance, and then they're developing the claws and specializing for finding food and flight. And in the different types of dinosaurs, you see different development in the digits in the hands and feet, either elongating or shrinking, versus where you can see there's like 3 toes there. They begin developing more toes and they're longer, as well as in their hands they're becoming more claw-like versus the smaller features you see.
Okay, so the last kind of split off here is the development of a beak with no teeth. And so this was about 110 million years ago. And so the kind of split off before this is the Archaeopteryx. This is a very important fossil that was sort of recently discovered, because before we kind of found this fossil, we only had here, and there was like a big gap in between the dromaeosaurs and the modern birds. So the discovery of the Archaeopteryx kind of filled the gap and kind of led us to find this beak with no teeth.
And a study by Baller and Abzanahov, I thought this study was incredibly interesting because it goes more into the molecular evolution. And they found that in a embryo, there's only one gene that differentiates between a chicken embryo developing a snout or a beak. So when they silence the genes, I think it was like a missense mutation, and the embryo developed a snout versus a beak. And while it was unethical to hatch these chicks because there is no exact evidence of if they would be able to survive, the scientists who studied it believe that the beak while it's specialized for their adaptation, if they developed the snout sort of a beak, they would still be able to survive if they were in the right environment. And the beak is the most recent evolution. It's the mutation developed around 40 to 50 million years ago.
And as I said earlier about how a lot of the regular dinosaurs sort of look like the same to modern birds, there's actually fossilization that shows that baby dinosaurs almost look identical to some of the modern birds we have today. And a little scientific term for that is called paedomorphism, which is that the adult resembles the same traits of a baby. So in this case, the adult bird is actually resembling a baby dinosaur. And so the hypothesis came out that birds may have come from dinosaurs by stopping the growth process inside the egg still, and then that the gene that Eric was talking about could have been mutated and activated while within that. And so that kind of moves into the part of how their size was, in that scientists think that their size was actually pretty advantageous for how the world was changing around them, that it was a lot easier to be small than to be big because things were getting some parts of the world was getting colder, so they need to conserve energy, and bigger animals tend to use a lot more energy to get their food and all that. And if they're smaller, then that means they don't need to obtain as much food, use as much energy. And at that point, when they start to shrink in size, is when we notice there are different separations in niches and everything. And size in general, we found out that dinosaurs started to get smaller a couple million years before birds even emerged as well.
Alright, so now I'm going to be talking about possibly different phylogenies that birds could come from rather than coming from the lizard-hipped dinosaurs. So like Ari had talked about before, the main difference between bird-hipped and lizard-hipped dinosaurs is the placement of the pubic bone. So you can see in the lizard-hipped dinosaurs, the pubic bone is facing forward towards the front of the animal, while the bird-hipped dinosaurs, their pubic bone is pointing backwards, like modern-day birds. And one reason why scientists think that these birds, even though they came from the lizard-hipped dinosaurs, they resemble the bird-hipped dinosaurs, is that it's kind of like convergent evolution. How in animals, like in the Allosaurid, for example, the intestines would stop right at the pubic bone, and because the pubic bone was pointed forward, their intestines weren't that long, so it took them a little bit longer to digest their food, and they couldn't digest tougher materials. So we kind of see in the Archaeopteryx fossil that their pubic bone kind of shifted a little bit back towards the back of the animal. So then their intestines elongated, meaning the digestion process was sped up, and that they could digest different foods, which would help them increase their survival rate, because now they can increase their range of prey that they can eat, or range of food that they can eat, and they can digest it faster. Also too, like Ari said, the lizard-hipped dinosaurs, their pubis bone is pointed forward and kind of created that upright structure that we see. And then another theory, it's not really looked at anymore because it's been proven to be false, but scientists used to think that birds maybe came from crocodiles because they had, it was called a endolymphatic duct that was very similar to crocodiles, and it's a membranous structure in the inner ear, evolved to deal with fluid exchange and immune regulation. But with modern science, we've been able to see there's lots of variations between the crocodiles and modern birds' endolymphatic duct, so they've kind of gone away from that hypothesis. And now I'm going to talk about where did dinosaurs go. So a lot of the theories about where dinosaurs went have to deal with climate change. The most popular one is that 65 million years ago, in an asteroid, they say somewhere around the size of Rhode Island, hit the Earth and had such a large impact that it launched like a lot of dust, a lot of particles of Earth, and so into the atmosphere, blocking out sunlight in some places and causing extreme climate change, which caused most of the dinosaurs to go extinct. But there's also a lot of like radical theories as well. Like one of my favorite ones is up here in the top left. You can kind of see like it's a flying saucer with aliens coming at this dinosaur, and some people believe that ancient aliens came and wiped out the dinosaurs so that humans could arise. And there actually is some evidence people have found because dinosaur bones have been known to be contaminated with iridium, which is an element found in nuclear bombs. And also too, dinosaur bones are actually like, they need to be covered in lead paint because they are radioactive, but that's because they're found in like radioactive rock. But Another theory is that there was an all-out dinosaur war. So the dinosaurs just all decided to fight each other, and that's how they went extinct. And then the other one that really is bizarre is Pala-Weltschmerz, and it's the idea that dinosaurs just got tired of living and decided consciously they wanted to go to extinct. So, I mean, I don't know how you come up with that, but that was one of the theories. And then transitional fossils, so we really talked about how until the Archaeopteryx was found, there was really just a huge gap. And so since the discovery of the Archaeopteryx, other discoveries of transitional fossils have been made. So the first one, right here on the far left, is the Anchiornis. It was discovered about 155 million years ago, and the importance of this one is that it's the first fossil that we've found that predates the Archaeopteryx that still has similarities to modern day birds. It's found with feathers that were adapted to flight, but it couldn't actually fly. It was probably more of a glider. And then on the right, we have the Archaeopteryx, like we mentioned before. It was just found probably like 145 million years ago. Then on the next slide, we have Confuciusornis, which was found about 125 million years ago. It had a bird-like tail and pygostyle skeletal structure, which means like its vertebrae are fused kind of like modern-day birds. And it had strong shoulders, they said, but still not capable for flight yet. And then right next to it is the Sciornis. It had like a flexible wishbone and stronger shoulder bones that did enable it to fly. And it was found about 110 million years ago. And then we have the Verona, and the thing with the Verona fossil is that we only have the legs of the fossil to go off of, but scientists did say that the legs of this fossil show extreme similarities to modern day birds, and that was found around 80 million years ago. And then the one on the right is the Ichthyornis, which was actually a very strong flyer, found about 80 million years ago, but one difference between it and modern day birds is that it still had teeth in its beak. So a lot of these fossils found, they resembled modern day birds, but they still had teeth in their beak. So that's,
All right, do we have questions from the audience?
You mentioned some evidence for the alien theory. Is there evidence for any of the other theories?
I mean, there's the crater that formed they say the Yucatan Peninsula with the meteorite crash. There's also too like evidence of volcanic action that occurred 65 million years ago, which they believed could have led to climate changes, but I couldn't find any evidence for the Paleosaurus one that they just decided to go extinct. Nor did I find evidence of a dinosaur war. I mean, it could have happened, but there's really no proof that it did.
For the one reason that they replaced the beaks with snouts, so you said that they thought that was unethical, but did they actually hatch them?
No,
or
they
just
didn't
guessed?
hatch them.
Okay.
I
They
don't
just
really know what they
terminated the eggs.
did them, I guess. But I mean, they basically grew them to the point of them being able to hatch, and then it didn't really go into it. Probably because it's sad, but no, it was unethical for them to hatch.
Are there hypotheses about why the birds survived?
Because of their adapting into smaller and smaller sizes, and I think that was like the main one we saw was
Like the dinosaurs all died out, but
Yeah.
the birds obviously continued, so.
Yeah.
And the hollow bones, was there a reason, since those evolved before flight, is there hypotheses about why, what would be the selective advantage?
We found out it was kind of just like the shrinking in size, but it didn't really go into the advantages of hollow bones.
Yeah, like what would be the driving force to select for?
Kind of with it is like before flight, they get to glide in general. So I mean, that would have helped gliding
Okay.
from tree to tree more than just flight.
Okay, guys, thank you.